Hi, everyone. Welcome to Raw, an honest discussion on race, hosted by the Raw denim community in the United States. My name is Eric, and I'm the founder of Fitted Underground and New York Denim Hangs. I also happen to be a white man married to a Black woman with a mixed child living in America in 2020. That makes racial inequality a very personal issue for me, and I want to state at the beginning of this conversation that I have come to know that structural racism is real, white privilege supports it, and our silence enables it. Therefore, in this moment of cultural change, we as a denim community want to play our part in elevating Black voices and promoting meaningful progress towards achieving racial equality in the United States, the country that I love, but that I also recognize is not perfect. I want to thank the New York, DC, Chicago, LA, and Southeast Denim Hangs groups and Lucas Fitz for making this conversation possible. I also want to thank our panelists for being with us. No one here is a pundit. We are all members of the denim community who have decided to contribute our voices to advance this conversation and help create a more perfect union. So let me introduce our panelists. They are Charles from CMB Denim, Natalie from DC Denim Hangs, Solomon from Left Hand Twill, Roger and Josefina from City Workshop Men's Supply Company, and Dorothy, the First Lady of Fitted Underground and New York Denim Hangs, my wife. Thank you all for being here today. I'd like to begin the conversation by creating the context. So much has happened in the United States in 2020 and has continued to build throughout the year. Against the backdrop of a pandemic that has disproportionately affected African Americans, we have also witnessed the killings of Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, and George Floyd, among others, which they themselves echo the killings of Trayvon Martin, Botham Jean, and Eric Gardner in recent years. It's a lot to process. So I'd like to start the dialogue by checking in with each of you. How are you doing? Charles, why don't we begin with you?
I appreciate you, Eric. Everybody for everybody who's involved putting this together, being on the panel with us. I'm doing good. Right now, I think I'd have to articulate my feeling of just excitement because of the response to all the racial tension going on right now. At least from my perspective, I see a lot of positivity going on, and I see a lot of the denim community coming together, which gives us the opportunity to do stuff like this. And so that makes me happy. Everything else aside, it's a regular balance of trying to get back into the regular routine of things with business, pivoting with creativity, not being able to leave the house. And things along that nature. But I'm excited to be amongst these other leaders in the denim industry, yourself and Lucas for putting this together, and just excited to hear everybody's perspective and what we can all do to make this better.
Thanks, man. Roger, Josefina, how are you guys doing?
Well, I got to tell you, it's been a crazy 2020 so far. I mean, with everything happening with the pandemic and not being able to open the store and welcoming our customers, it's been really difficult from that perspective and figuring out how business was going to go throughout 2020. And then with all of these racial issues taking place at the same time as we were thinking about trying to reopen, it just kind of put a damp on things, to be honest. Like, I want to think about business, but it's hard to think about business when everything is happening in the world right now. And I don't know how to really articulate how I feel, but I'm just hoping that we come out better on the other side of this, whatever, things we do to move forward.
It feels very emotional. It's a very emotional time, even though a lot of customers and people always ask us how we're doing, how we're feeling, but it's an emotional time right now. Yeah. So, but we're actually excited because we're going to be able to open our store next week. So that's going to be good.
Something to look forward to.
Yeah, something different now.
That's great. We're excited about that too. So, Dorothy, how are you?
So honestly, whenever someone asks that question, the first instinct is to say, I'm okay, but I'm not okay. It's been a really difficult week. And, you know, I echo Roger and Josephine's sentiments about it just being a really difficult 2020 overall. This last week has been intense in the sense that a lot of emotions have come up, and a lot of conversations have had to be had. And, you know, from last week to now, I have to say I feel a little bit better, because we are seeing some progress and we're really seeing a movement, and that really gives me some encouragement.
Great. Natalie, how are you doing?
You know, okay. It's been a roller coaster. I would call it a roller coaster. So like the pandemic was just really knocked the wind out of me. Stop watching the news, stop doing all the things that I normally do to try and stay informed. And then to have to stumble across videos of lynchings made it really difficult. But I kind of feel the same, that towards the end of this week, last week, and now this week, things are getting better. I'm seeing change that I've never seen before in people, of all people, but especially the white community. Like they're saying and acting in ways I've never seen and didn't think I would ever see in my lifetime.
Solomon, how are you doing, man?
You know, I've been asked this question a lot the past week, like more than I think I've ever had happen to me. And you know, I think I'm still trying to eternalize what's going on. Nonetheless, I'm maintaining, man. You know, that's all I can do. Yeah. So, like Charles said, you know, at some point, I'd like to get back to working on my projects and whatnot, but it's kind of hard to be excited about anything just because of how things have been lately, you know. And like I think we're all in a space to feel some kind of way, or you know, feel hurt or sad. And I think we you know, we should be able to allow ourselves that time, you know, to get better. So, but you know, I'm doing all right, man.
Thanks, man. And I got to sneak in a quick happy birthday as well. So,
yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
And seeing this, it's my birthday. You know, like last year, you know, things were all good, so to speak. You know, so now here we are. You know, I want to be happy and like feeling good about my day, but you look outside and it's pretty much a war zone in some places. So it's kind of hard to, you know, be on the up and up.
Natalie, I actually want to circle back with you about something you said in the conversations that you're having. I'm curious about the types of conversations that you're having. And in particular, are you having the same conversation with people of color as you are with white people these days about what is going on in the United States relating to race?
Good question. They are different conversations, mostly because there's a big age difference between the people who interact with me that are Black and brown and indigenous, and then the people who are interacting with me that are white. So the conversations I have with, say, my Black mom and her friends and my aunties is very different because they come at activism differently. They think about activism differently than, say, my white friends who I have never had so many people thank me for doing nothing in my entire life. I appreciate it, but it was very surprising. Or what I think is nothing, like things that I just do out of my nature that are normal for me. I've been thanked for, which was kind of, I don't know, still getting used to that. But they're like, I'm seeing them hear what I'm saying, but then taking action on what is being said. And I've never seen that next step happen before.
Yeah. And do people feel like they can be more direct in talking about race these days? I mean, really, it's been since the killing of George Floyd, and something seemed to change. There seemed to be a crack in the collective consciousness of the country. Do people feel like they can be more direct when they speak about race, and in particular, direct in terms of speaking with white people?
Yeah, I'll take that. I think that this is definitely different. In the past, I've had conversations mostly with my Black friends and my family whenever we've had these incidents, like Trayvon Martin, even Buffalo Jean. But with this, there was something, I don't know if it's the pandemic and just us all just kind of like being home and like reflecting in some way, but it all came to a head. And it's a conversation that almost felt like you can't avoid it anymore. You shouldn't avoid it anymore. So whereas in the past, my conversations might have been just like in passing with my white friends, that's terrible. Oh my gosh, yeah, I heard about that. That's terrible. Now it's been in-depth conversations. And I actually work in corporate America, and the response there has been very strong as well within my company. And I don't know if that has to do with the fact that we had an Amy Cooper incident, right? That really brought that home as well. It doesn't necessarily have to be, that someone died and got killed, but here you're seeing blatant racism. And that was addressed. And I think everyone saw that and felt that in a different way.
Yeah, it does seem like the conversations are more forceful this time and direct. Charles, what's different? Why are we seeing this now?
I think that, and I agree, Dorothy, with Dorothy. I agree that because of COVID happening, I think that the whole community, the whole population, the whole world has something that they could share with, meaning they're sharing in some type of, unfortunately, some type of death. It's some type of, something that everybody can relate to. Everybody's doing the same exact thing right now. And so for the first time in a long time, government officials have to speak up about stuff. Brands have to speak up about stuff. Big businesses have to speak up about stuff. So everybody's already on the platform for what are you going to do right now? And I think when all these deaths, George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, when these things happened, the news had no choice but to say, what are you going to do about it? What's your take on it right now? And that right there, coupled with the impacts of COVID, I think it was just no choice really to support. Now is the time to speak up.
Yeah.
I just want to piggyback on that. And I think from my perspective, I think what was different is that with a lot of these cases where Black men or women are being killed by the police, it seems like even if it's on video, the police can kind of justify because they're in the act of doing their job where they're stopping something. But this video was like a man with his hands in his pocket with his knee on somebody's neck, not really acting as a police officer, just in my eyes, committing a heinous act. And if you had made that a black and white video, it was like, what is this? Is this 1964? Like, right. It was just unreal because it was extreme because it wasn't like he had his gun out and was like, freeze. It was just a man kneeling on some guy's neck and he's yelling for his mother. So I think that struck a lot of people. And like we were talking about earlier, I was getting calls and texts from people and I'm like, this is different. This is different. Yeah. Because people actually saw what we've been talking about forever.
Yeah. Yeah, it was a really overt form of racism in terms of how Black people are treated all the time. We've seen this event before so many times, but you're right, just in terms of the video of it, the length of it, the brutality of it, did feel different. But I want to talk a little bit more about that experience of Black America. That was an overt form of racism, but we also experience in America covert forms of racism as well. So I'd like, now that we have this platform, I'd like for you guys just to talk a little bit about what it's like being Black in America, not just in terms of the overt racism we see on the television or maybe in movies, but also in terms of covert racism, systemic justice that maybe we're so used to, we don't we don't acknowledge all the time. So can you speak a little bit about that? And in particular for white viewers who maybe don't have that many Black friends or just are less familiar with your experience. So Solomon, do you want to kick this one off?
Yeah, so covertly, you know, it could be simple stuff like, you know, I could be out and you get a hand in your hair, questions about your hair. You know, I got dreadlocks, you know, so that's always like a topic of conversation that white people love to touch on. And it's, you know, the personal bubble is popped, you know, stuff like that. Just comments on your appearance in general. And before I quit my day job, I was stressed out working that job because there was always something, you know. I had people tell me, it's good to see Black people working. And, you know, he handed me a tip and gave me $20 and said, I love to see Black people working. And I'm like, you know, we all work. We're all out here working. We're all out here trying to make a living. You know, I'll take your $20, but you know, your statement is terrible, you know. Another instance, I'll make it quick and I'll go back to my hair. I was helping a customer and she came in, she's a school teacher. And when I was at work, I would wear my hair up. Like my hair was always up at work. And she came in and she was like, "You should have came to my school today." I said, "Oh yeah, why?" She was like, it was crazy hair day. You know, and like I'm at work, you know, like, and I'm like I have to deal with that.
Mm-hmm.
Like it seems, I don't want to say petty, but over and over it builds up, you know, it builds up over time. And like, it's just something that I deal with. And, you know, I live in Colorado Springs, man. There's not too many Black folks out here, you know? So like, there's nowhere to really turn or like have a conversation with anybody.
Anyone else have any other experiences of covert racism that we maybe don't talk about all the time?
I'll speak on it a little bit. So, and this is in no way or form any endorsement for other voices in the Army, but I'll make it plain, I'll make it transparent that I'm an active Army guy. I'm an active Army soldier, and I've noticed in my early years, I've been in 18 years now. I've noticed in my early years that when I would have the beard like Roger, you know, and let's just call it out. Like Black people have different skin than white people, or different skin than Spanish or Asian or whatever. And so we get hair bumps. And so for some people, and every Black person is different, it's difficult to shave with a straight razor because you will get, it's called pseudofolliculitis. And that's pretty much called ingrown hairs. And I got those a lot coming into the Army, and I needed a shaving profile. And I couldn't even imagine the covert racism that was that and how I was treated because of that, because I had this beard, which made me less of a soldier or less of some opportunity for something else. And as far as like anything else in high school and middle school, elementary school, like I developed some type of numbness and some type of shield to be able to just combat that racism, that covert racism, and make people listen to what I'm saying and make people see that I'm not seeing the same thing you're seeing right now. Like, I don't see you as Black and white, and I want you to see me the same way. And I kind of demanded that from people.
When people don't hear you like that, what is your experience? Does it feel like it diminishes you in terms of how people are looking at you? Or how does it make you feel?
I mean, to be honest, I don't remember the last time I've dealt with covert racism aside from just waving at somebody in the car because I'm outside running or in the grocery store and they're not waving back. It doesn't faze me unless it's something like Roger was saying. Unless it's something on the TV that I'm seeing happen to someone else, that this is stuff that people don't want to say they see or they say that they understand. Like it's right in front of your face. You see it. So if I see it, I know you see it. Type thing. And aside from that, I just developed kind of a numbness, like I'm sure a lot of people have.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree with that. You know, I think that to survive almost, you have to develop a shield, right? A little bit of callus to be able to deal with day to day without losing your mind, right? Because, you know, we call them microaggressions. We experience this every single day, right? Something as little as, again, me being in corporate America, the minute I open my voice and, you know, I speak, it's like, oh, you're so articulate, right?
Mhm.
As if it's not expected that, you know, I can speak well, right? I'm articulate. And that to them is a compliment, right? And, you know, things, I have so many experiences where, you know, it's blatant but subtle, right? It's still covert. You know, just recently, you know, I lost my mother. And the day me and my family, we went to the cemetery the same day she passed away to pick out her plot. And we actually went to, it was a really nice cemetery in a really nice neighborhood in Long Island, predominantly white, very rich neighborhood. And we asked to see the different, you know, mausoleums, and those are expensive, but we knew that that's what, you know, we wanted. And when we were done with the tour, and mind you, this is, you know, coronavirus time. Unfortunately, a lot of people are passing away and they have a lot of business. They're busy, so we get that. But when we were done with the tour, we said, okay, wonderful. You know, what's the price? And we were given the prices, but immediately we're told, you know, but there's a cemetery out, you know, exit whatever, that has much better prices, right? We didn't ask you for that, right? What made you think that price was an issue for us, right? These are the subtle things that happen. You know, had we been white, would you have automatically assumed that these prices would be too high for us, right? So there are little subtle microaggressions, things that are said, you're being directed in a certain way or being told certain things based off assumptions about who you are as a Black person. And that's just the experience, unfortunately, that we go through every day.
Yeah. And I think I might have a little bit of a different, well, maybe not similar, but different experience with it all because I'm biracial. I'm very light. I'm in my winter skin, so I'm extra light. And I get a lot of, well, where are you from? And I'm like, well, I'm from Virginia. And they're like, well, no, where are your parents from? I'm like, well, they're from North Carolina and Oklahoma. And they're like, no, but really? And so it's like this conversation that I have because one of my mini jobs is retail and people just want to know. They just want to know. And I get it to an extent because I'm a nosy, curious person. But if someone says they're from Virginia, you got to just leave it. And you just have to trust them that they know where they're from. And that if they're not telling you, it's not your business. So that's the one that people think is almost a compliment, that you're exotic looking, but it's not. It's definitely not a compliment, and it's exhausting. And I'm sure all of us have been exhausted by people wondering where the heck we're from.
Thank you, guys.
I say something too. You see it too, like Natalie's light skin, right?
Super light.
And you know, then Josefina's right after her, right? And then there's Dorothy. But if you look and you think about your friends and your family, and you look at government jobs, you look at businesses and stuff, light skin is the closest to white that people are willing to accept. When someone dark skin comes in, it's a sense of fear, it's a sense of threatening, it's something like that some people they look at stuff like that when that's not the case, you know. And so I get it, you know. So it's like I feel like, and I'm not saying all people are like this, but some people may feel more comfortable coming to someone light skinned than they are to someone dark skinned or someone big and tall like Roger or Solomon. You know what I mean? Like it's something that happens. Like, look at his hands. You know what I'm saying?
I'm a little bit in the grand scheme of things, but to piggyback on all the comments, like what you said, Charles, I don't think to my knowledge, I've actually experienced any overt racism in my life. I grew up in a predominantly Black neighborhood as a kid, And then when I went to high school, that was a high school that was really mixed. But I'm sure in my life I've experienced covert racism. And I don't know if it's just from just how I was raised. I was actually telling a white friend this recently because he was asking how do we feel, and he wants to do the right thing and things of that nature. And as I was trying to, and this was on DM, and I was typing it out to him, and I was saying to him that, you know, I'm living the proverbial American dream. You know, I have a wife, I have a home. You know, I had a really good paying job when I was in corporate America, but there's still this extra jacket that I have to put on when I go out that I could feel. And it's not like always in my face, but like if I go into a store and I get that kind of look, you know, you feel it. And even if it's not there, it's something that you always have to question. Like, is it because I'm Black? It may not be, but it's still something that it's almost like we innately carry it because it's just been pervasive in our environment. So yeah, I can't explain it. I could just feel it. And it doesn't happen all the time. And as I get older, I guess as you get older, you get to that point where you're like, you know, you can just kind of like brush it off. But, you know, it's something I still from time to time feel. I feel that weight of being a Black man in America. Like if something bad happens on the news and it has something to do with something happening to a white person, I'm like, well, I hope a Black person didn't do it because that's going to cause some problems.
Yeah.
May not happen, may not cause a problem for me, but it's going to cause a problem for somebody somewhere, you know, because we get no breaks. Something goes wrong, one Black person do something, it's all of us. And that's just like that weight that as a Black person I carry. And like I said, I can't explain it. I could just feel it.
Yeah. Roger, thank you for that. And thank everybody for that. I mean, it's so good to hear you guys talking honestly about your experience in the country, because I think a lot of white people we don't have an opportunity to hear this all the time. So it's really illuminating. I'll share that, you know, as you guys are talking about this, I reflect on my own experience. It's like, I've almost never been made to feel guilty for being a white man in America, right? And what that really speaks to is white privilege. And I want to speak briefly about white privilege, just briefly about my own experience. The first time I heard that term, I felt like somebody was taking something from me. Like, I've worked hard for what I've accomplished, what I've done in my life. Nobody's handed anything to me. And so I didn't like it, so I resisted it at first. Then as I sat with it, I realized that white privilege isn't an absolute privilege. It's a relative privilege. It doesn't mean that you're born with a silver spoon in your mouth, but it does mean that when you're born in America, all things equal, if you're white rather than Black, all other things equal, you're going to have an easier time. You're going to have fewer obstacles in your path. And so I'd like to speak just a little bit about white privilege, what it is, and also how it shows up in your life in terms of a negative effect, right? The opposite of privilege is a lack of privilege. Actually, I have a few antonyms. So the definition of privilege is a special right, advantage, or immunity granted to a particular person or group. The opposite, here it is. The opposite is disenfranchisement, exclusion, prohibition, and inhibition. So I'm curious if you can talk a little bit either about white privilege or Black lack of privilege and how that's played out in your life.
I'll start it off since we just talked about my lack of melanin. That's one of my many privileges. So I think it's much easier for people to come to me and be like, thank you so much for telling me this, or this is the question I have about racism, because I'm racially ambiguous. They see me as less of a threat and somebody who's there to help them. But I'm sure none of them have had the conversation with their grandma who sat them down at 7 and said, you are Black and you are Indigenous and you are a woman and you will have to work 3 times as hard to get the bare minimum, to get people to acknowledge you. So that's like balancing the privileges I have with having good hair and light skin with the fact that I'm already set so far back. And I'm sure we have all had relatives have that conversation with us. Like, you can't do so many things because that's going to put you in danger, or it's not going to give you the opportunities that it will give other people who don't have melanin, as much melanin as you.
Mhm.
I think that's how, from my perspective, I think, yeah, what is the opposite of white privilege? Because before I knew what white privilege was, I knew that I had to work twice as hard, three times as hard. Like, why? There's a line from, I don't know if anybody saw Queen and Slim.
Yeah.
There's like one line he said in there, is like, why do Black people always have to be great? And that resonated with me so hard. Like, yeah, we have to be great at everything. I don't know if that's why we succeed at a lot of things. That helps. But it is a true statement. It was like, I guess I had Black non-privilege. That was my motivating factor, because I knew I had to do or work twice as hard as anybody else.
Exactly.
And one of the things that I want to point out is that white privilege is an individual thing. It's something that I have. It's something that individuals have. But collectively, when you think about the entire United States, all these white people having a certain privilege, relative privilege, that Black people don't have, it trickles up into something. And the thing that it trickles up into, in my opinion, is systemic racism, is systemic inequality. And so we see it in systems of education, that generally, if you're born into a predominantly Black area, your education system is going to be poor. We see it in systems of health, that women who give birth who are Black are more likely to die of childbirth than if you're white. We see it systems of economics. And so that white privilege actually plays up into a larger societal debate, and that really runs into that covert racism that we're talking about earlier. And so I wanted to get your guys' perspectives as well on systemic racism. You know, what's fomented this whole conversation is police brutality, the killing of George Floyd. Yet police brutality is one component of the conversation. There's all the other components that I just touched on, education and economics, et cetera. So, you know, when you think about all the injustices that have been done across the board, and not just for 5 or 10 years, and not just for decades, but actually for centuries, to Black people, since when they first arrived here in 1619 on a slave ship. What's that experience like? That's something that I don't have to live with. So I'm curious, what's that experience of systemic racism like, seeing it, but until recently, not really being able to talk about it?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a great question, because it really gets down to the core of the issue, right? What we're seeing, what we're experiencing is all as a result of systemic racism. And you raised some good examples, right? We had our first child 18 months ago. And one of the big things for me is that I felt like I had to have a doula in the room with me, right, with us, because if anything went wrong, I wanted to make sure that there was a non-Black voice in there that could advocate for me. And it's unfortunate that, you know, I had to think that way, that we had to think that way, but that is white privilege, right? The idea that white women, doesn't matter education level, income level, class, their voice will be heard if they complain about something not being right to their doctor in comparison to a Black woman who, you know, could be highly educated, you know, what have you. And that bias in the medical industry has been studied over and over and over, and they can't find anything other than there being a bias against, you know, Blacks, unfortunately. And why Black women are dying at 3 times the rate of white women in this country, right? Just because of pure bias. You know, another example would be, you know, we're dealing with an opioid crisis right now. And that is regarded as a health crisis, right? Who is the opioid crisis impacting? It's primarily impacting, you know, white Americans. But when we had the crack cocaine epidemic in the 80s, right, which impacted predominantly the Black community, that was looked at as a war, a war on drugs. And not only were the dealers being incarcerated for it, so were the users, right? So as opposed to right now, if you are a heroin addict, you are directed towards social services. We need to help you. We need to help you recover. Whereas if you were Black, in jail you go because you have issues, right? And that's all we can do for you, right? So that is the difference between the experiences, and it speaks to the privileges.
And it speaks to the policy as well. Sorry, go ahead, Solomon.
That even goes down to having a dime bag of weed. If you get caught with a dime bag of weed, you're gonna, in some states, I know a lot of states pass the bill to legalize weed, but back in the day, a dime bag of weed would send you to jail for 3 to 5 years, and that says a lot about this country. It's a nonviolent offense, if at all, to spend 3 to 5 years in prison for a dime bag of weed, and that was prevalent in the Black community.
Right.
So it just speaks to how, again, white privilege percolates up into systemic racism, which then percolates up into government policy as well. And so what we see today is a movement, Black Lives Matter, that's really rising up in answer to that. A lot of people, not all, but some, a lot, are scared of the Black Lives Matter movement. Some people will see it as a threat, as something that's potentially violent. I'd like you guys to speak to that. What is the Black Lives Movement, and what is trying to be achieved with it at this point in time?
I think
go ahead, Charles.
Okay, thanks. All right, Roger. And just my perspective, and I think we all touched on it. We'll give it our how are you doing responses. I think that it now today it's a better organized message, if you will, about what has been going on. And you talk about the covert racism, and it just, we're talking hundreds of years ago where it began, where you are inferior to me because of this. And now since that stemmed off of that, we're dealing with all this stuff right now. And now that everybody's focused on these deaths, these past 3 deaths that have been paramount in the Black voices. Now we have a message that's better organized, because we have no crap, you were on this dude's neck, and no crap, you ran behind and shot him in his back, or no crap, you ran into this house with not all the facts, and just shot this lady 8 times. So it's now it's in your face. It's in your face now, and you have no choice but to look at it. And people are better being organized in how they're articulating their message. They're getting to the right people who are in positions of power who can move this message along. And I think more so than ever, the support has been tremendous. And I think that is the difference between now and 1963, when Martin Luther King was on the National Mall in DC with 250,000 people. Now you have millions of people that are saying the same thing, and it's better organized.
And more white people as well.
Exactly.
And that's a big change. The message is starting to get into the power structures in the United States as well. So, the Black Lives Matter movement is more organized. Progress is being made, and that's a wonderful thing, and we should celebrate that. And all the people out in the street who are peacefully protesting is an absolutely wonderful thing. At the same time, there's a lot of pushback against the Black Lives Matter movement. There's ways to minimize it and dehumanize it and delegitimize it. And I want to talk about those briefly. To somebody who would respond to Black Lives Matter with all lives matter, what would you say to them? What perhaps are they missing?
You're part of the problem. I mean, if you're saying all lives matter, or I don't see color, and you don't want to come to any kind of understanding as to why we're saying Black Lives Matter, it's an issue.
Right.
You know, like we're out here fighting for our lives. It's as simple as that. We're fighting for our lives. By saying Black Lives Matters, it's just saying that we want to be recognized as people. You know, it's as simple as that. So to undermine it by saying all lives matters, it's just a complete hijacking of the movement and what we're trying to get across. And it's not cool, in my opinion.
What I find interesting is often that people who say all lives matter also then say that blue lives matter, which there's a lot of issues with that. But
Right.
that means that the issue you have with the statement Black Lives Matter is the Black part. Because if all lives matter, that inherently means that Black lives matter and you care about them. But
Yeah, Natalie, I think you just froze up on us. Can other people hear her?
No.
Okay.
I think Roger has something to say too.
Yep, Roger.
I was just piggybacking off of what Solomon said. It's just, I mean, it does, even if it didn't say Black Lives Matter, it could just say, I am a person. I mean, that we're just trying to say, you know, I want to live just like anybody else. You know, if you got to pull me over, just don't kill me, you know?
Right.
I'm a person. So yes, if you are having an issue with Black Lives Matter, then yeah, you are part of the problem because you're not listening to what people are saying. Yeah.
It's as simple as that. I'm sorry, go ahead, Dorothy.
Oh, no, I was just going to say, you know, there have been a lot of analogies to help people just understand or process why we're saying Black Lives Matter. Doesn't mean that all lives do not matter. But, you know, if there's a block with 4 houses, right, and one is on fire and the police department or the fire department comes, right, and you're screaming, all houses matter, right? You don't get it. There is one house that is on fire and needs help, right? And we are saying that Black lives need help. We need people to understand the struggles and the issues that we're going through, right? But it doesn't negate the fact that everyone matters, right? But we have a problem that we need to fix right now.
And that speaks so clearly to the heart of why we're having this conversation. You know, nobody, to my knowledge up here, is saying that Black lives matter more than anybody else. No, the statement is Black lives matter, full stop. That's it, right? And it's not negating anybody else, but it is a way of uplifting your voices, other Black voices, so that we can reach equality in America. So there has been a lot of pushback and resistance, not only to Black Lives Matter, but just having these conversations in general. It seems like a lot of people don't want to have them. And so I want to share what happened today. Somebody posted about this conversation to Reddit, to the Raw Denim Reddit forum, and there was a lot of comments on it. And I'd like to read some of them to you. A lot of them, I should say, were very supportive, which was wonderful to see. But by no means were all of them. So here are some comments about this call that we were going to have today, and it showing up in the Raw Denim forum, which everybody up here is affiliated with. So one comment is, you have to be effing kidding me. Another comment is, stuff like this should be held someplace else. Another comment is, my Black friends didn't think they were oppressed until they were politicized. Another comment is, this is an issue that's extremely complicated and historically rooted, and I just don't see how making a panel on the issue of racism using voices within the Raw Denim community is going to solve anything. So I'm curious, what would you guys say to those people? Should we be having this conversation?
Yeah, yeah, we can have this conversation. It's, you know, it's like we stepped up. Okay, we stepped up and made the uncomfortable comfortable to talk about. And the reason behind that is because we care, and it's just crazy that, and we're not saying that this Black Lives Matter and this, like, I need to be heard stuff is like on the forefront of our minds every single day, because it's not. If it was like that, then you would have been hearing this Black Lives Matter for years and years to come. It would have been an issue. It'd have been a hashtag forever, but it hasn't been that way because we have so many, well, I can only speak for myself and some of the family members I know, that we have just buried those type of biases and judgments towards us so deep that it's not going to be there until someone lifts it up. Meaning it was fine, and we're not looking at it. We're not asking for racism. We're not asking for you to look at us and give us this support or something like that. But like, have you ever been judged because of the color of your skin, or have you ever been denied an opportunity because of the color of your skin? Like, a lot of times, 99% is going to be no. So now it's like, listen, learn, educate, and then let's take action together. And the reason why it's in the denim community is because the denim community is predominantly white. Let's talk about that. It is. You know, a lot of these businesses are predominantly white. A lot of these brands and makers and heritage goods are predominantly white. And the history goes back to, it doesn't start at Levi's. Like, a lot of this indigo was made in Africa, was made in Asia. Like, a lot of these things are not talked about because of, it goes back to white privilege. And that's the bottom line.
And to piggyback off that, the first people who wore denim in America were slaves. It was called slave cloth. Like,
yeah, or Negro cloth.
Right. Like, we have to talk about it because this is our history, and we're not really represented in brands, in the iconology of denim. It was whitewashed and co-opted. So we have to talk about it. This is the exact right place to talk about it.
And fades were the distinction to let me know that I can see that slave over there amongst the crops. That's where fades came from, because they've been wearing their overalls or denim for so long. That's where the idea came from. Mm-hmm. And no one talks about that.
And, you know, who was plowing the cotton fields 150 years ago, you know? Yeah. And Charles, you used a word, you said, we're here stepping up. And I just want to talk about that briefly. You know, we are stepping up, and you guys are stepping up, and I appreciate everybody being here. I want to speak just briefly to white people who are watching this. You know, everybody has a part to play. And if you don't understand something, that's okay. You know, you don't have to be perfect about this, but have a conversation, ask a friend, do something that's uncomfortable. It may benefit you, but it's also probably going to benefit the people who don't want to hear it as well. So we really want to encourage people to play their part. Everybody has a part in this to play, and we are doing what we can to play our part, and we hope that you do that as well. I want to read a statement here from Martin Luther King that kind of speaks to that. He says, "I have almost reached the regrettable conclusion that the Negro's great stumbling block in the stride toward freedom is not the white citizen's counselor or the Ku Klux Klanner, but the white moderate who is more devoted to order than to justice, who prefers a negative peace, which is the absence of tension, to a positive peace, which is the presence of justice." So we are trying to get to a place of justice in this country. And I want to end on a little bit more of a positive note, which is, what is a better America? What does a post-racial America look like? How would your experiences as people in this country be different if race really didn't matter?
There's something that comes to me, and I don't really have an answer per se, but there's a commercial that was out a couple of months ago that for Nike, and it was for LeBron James' sneaker. And he had this montage of clips of these kids doing these really good things. And at the end of the commercial, he said, "Wouldn't it be great if we didn't have to come from humble beginnings?" And that spoke volumes to me. It made me well up, because, yeah, it's like you hear these stories of these athletes, they come from these humble beginnings, and it makes for a great story. But in the grand scheme of things, it would have been much better if they started out on an equal playing field like everybody else.
Exactly.
You remember, Roger, has anybody ever seen, it was a video, you just reminded me of it, Roger, where there was a guy in front of a team of 50 people, black, white, girl, boy, everything, right? And he said, "I'll give $100 to the winner of this race," right? And he said, "I'm gonna ask you a series of questions." It was about 25 questions. And the idea of it was just to show you in person what white privilege is. And so at the end of it, all the white people, boys and girls were in the front. And he said, now I want you to look behind you. All the black people were in the back. They might've took maybe 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 steps. But he said, now look behind you, that they have to work 2, 3 times as hard as you just because of how they were born. And that just speaks volumes.
That was a really good one too.
Really good.
Really profound.
Yeah.
I love that video. I actually shared that one as well to my Instagram stories, just because it really was a really great visual, right? You talk about what having access to a good education, private school education, even having a 2-parent home, right? Just the difference that makes, and why we don't necessarily have that in the Black community, and then why we are behind, right? And it goes back to the systemic things that have happened, just prison policies and, obviously Black people being in certain neighborhoods that don't have the best education, and how you're starting 10 feet ahead. And at the end of that, he said, listen, you guys are all going to have to run the same race, right? And realize that, again, they're starting way behind you, right? And it was just a powerful, illustration. Yeah.
We're going to have to wrap up soon so we can jump onto the other call. But before we go, do you guys have resources? If somebody's out there watching this and has ears to hear and eyes to see, do you have resources where people can go learn more and just educate up about these issues?
Yeah, so I'll throw in a few things that I think are really, really helpful that people can do right now. Netflix 13th, if you haven't seen it, please watch it. Just talking about, just again, how we went from slavery to incarceration, right, through prisons, and the policies that have been set in place to allow that to happen. That's a wonderful one. New York Times has a podcast called 1619. 1619 was the year the first slaves were brought to this country, and how that's defined the trajectory of the United States of America. And then also I always, think about the kids, right? Just being a mom now, Eric and I being parents, how do we change course, starting with the children, right? Because, our grandparents might be too far gone at this point to change their views, but we can capture the minds of the children. I thought that CNN did a really wonderful town hall with Sesame Street just this past weekend, really just describing and explaining, what's going on right now. And I think it's important that we talk about these things with our children.
Amazon has a whole list of, in above the banner across it is Black Lives Matters. It has a whole list of movies right now that kind of touches on these subjects right now too. I Am Not Your Negro with James Baldwin is a good documentary to watch too. So there's a lot of information in that.
And I also want to give a shout out to Natalie's Instagram. Natalie, you do have fantastic stories and content that you post to your Instagram all the time. It's helped me, you've educated me, so thank you for that.
Thank you.
Cool.
Yeah, I also challenge everybody, I know the last part of Lucas and I's conversation, we challenged everybody to watch Remember the Titans. I mean, we're here because of the commonality of Denim, and I think it provides a team effort in things, and the basic depiction of race and how we can combat that as a team, at least in the Denim community, and maybe stretching out to even bigger communities and society as a whole, is to watch that movie. I mean, football is the American favorite sport, and Remember the Titans. I mean, it shows the process, and that's what it's really about: processing your thoughts, your emotions with this, not addressing and coming at people with anger and frustration or ignorance, for that matter, and just listening.
Cool guys. Well, I just want to thank all of you for doing this. This is an uncomfortable conversation to have. Like I said at the beginning, none of us are professional pundits. We're all just stepping up and doing what we think is right to help achieve equality in America. And I also want to say that I love my wife, I love my son, and I love you guys. And the reality is that we aren't different on a certain level, and that yes, all lives do matter. But to get to that place where all lives matter, we have to go through a process. And we first have to recognize and uplift that Black lives matter and that Black people are equal to white people. And to do that, we have to recognize white privilege in each of us, and we have to tear down systemic racism that is endemic and codified within our government structures, economy, health, society. So thank you guys for paying attention. Thank you guys for tuning in, those people who are watching this. Right now, we're going to jump over and we're going to do a Zoom call, which is going to be a community forum. Everybody's welcome to come over and participate in that. We ask that you be respectful when you do. No intolerance will be tolerated. And you can go to www.rawdenimvoices.com, and the link will be up there. So thank you again for watching. Thank you guys, panelists, for being a part of this. And we hope to continue the conversation.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
See you guys.